Welcome to the fourth round of the 2021 Kart Championships. Let's have a look at the standings after the third round of the season. It's still quite close at the top. The top three of us have raced in every round so far. So I'm just out in front ahead of John with Greg in third place. Dad currently sitting in fourth place in the standings, having missed one of the three rounds up to that point. But overall, the championship standings are quite close up the top there, considering the point system for our championship. So it's going to be exciting to see who goes on to do well towards the latter stages of this season. Here at the second half of the standings, so Mike, who will be back racing here today, as will George, sitting on 78 and 48 points respectively, and then also Tom C and Jake, who will be racing later on this season but haven't got any points on the board just yet. So round number 4 will be at Teamsport Brighton, the same venue as the second round of the season, so most drivers will have a little bit of experience of this track this season, and a few of us have been more times than that, so we should be well versed at what the layout of the track is and how we should perform around here. So let's get on with round number 4 of this championship. There's 4 rounds to go after this, so we'll know after this event here today who'll be leading at the midpoint of the season. So 3 camera angles to view from today. John, who we're viewing from as we exit the pit lane to start the time trial sessions. Then also myself and also Greg have the onboard cameras. So as mentioned previously at Teamsport Brighton, in the early part of the season we were having to run time trial sessions for the whole day because of all the COVID restrictions we had towards the start of 2021. But then from round 5 onwards we could race in our normal race format, which we all thoroughly enjoyed, and of course we're looking forward to going racing next time out, where once again we'll be at Q Leisure Brighton, probably most of our favourite track, but there'll be a bigger grid, so that should be quite exciting. So I'm bored of myself here, just trying to get some early laps in, because as we've seen before around this track, it's very easy to get stuck up in traffic, so setting a lap time when you have some space is so important. So the way that we split the time trial sessions up is the whole session divided up into 7 slots, and then also a slot for the average time over the whole session, so we get a pretty good idea about who's quick. So let's see in the session here today who's going to be quick and who's not. 30-minute sessions, so a good amount of laps within those chunks there, considering it's only about a 35-second lap when you're on a good one. You can see here I've exited the pit lane and I've done a pretty good first lap. On this second lap I'm coming up behind Mike here, who is actually pretty quick around here. He's pretty good at go-karting and just driving in general, but as we come towards the end of this lap we're getting stuck in a little bit of traffic, so we're going to have to back out of this in the next few laps. Actually Mike lets us, I think, through round the inside there, so we go for a nice little move around the outside, even though he did definitely give us the position. But we're just trying to get some overtakes in, and there we go. It all opens up in front of us here, and we have a bit of a gap now to the kart in front to get our head down. On board with Greg now. You can see he didn't participate in too many rounds in 2020. He finished 7th place in the standings last year, but on occasions, even at this track right here, he was pretty quick, putting in some podium performances, so he's pretty good around this track, and he'll be gunning for probably a few session victories here today, but definitely getting on the podium out of the 5 people that we got racing. Myself, Greg, John, Mike and George, all of us could win on our day, but of course Greg knows this track quite well, and I think we'll be gunning for some top spots here today. So he's coming onto the bridge, and this is to start a lap here, so let's have a quick ride on board here. So he's taking a slightly wider line here to try and cut back to the apex at turn 1, and then you get into one of the twistier sections here, so it's basically 180 degrees back on yourself, so that's pretty nicely done there. You can see he's got a kart just in front of him, which he's catching, not rapidly fast though, so he's not getting stuck up behind him, but this lap's been pretty tidy so far. It's very hard to judge the momentum through the corners that you can take in the early part of the session, because you're not sure how grippy the sort of surface is underneath you sometimes. I don't know whether it's when it's hotter or colder, it can be a little bit more slippy than others. But regardless, a good lap there from Greg. That should be one of his quick ones for sure. So let's go back on board here with John. He's not the biggest fan of this venue. He doesn't particularly enjoy all of the tight and twisty sections. Even though this track does have somewhat decent flow for an indoor track, I can definitely agree with him on that. It doesn't really feel like a proper karting track. And while, to be fair, we have driven at some even tracks lower speeds and less like a kart track than this, sometimes they can be fun, and I think you sort of got to find the fun in it sometimes when it's possibly not your day and you're not feeling it 100%. I think John did say, even though he's obviously quite at the top of the championship here, not a massive gap to me at the top, he wasn't particularly looking forward to this round because of the layout of the track and just the general flow of it. So I think he was thinking damage limitation, just try and pick up the performances when he can, see what he can do in terms of the time trial, but he wasn't especially planning for this to be one of the better performances this season just because of the layout of the track here. But you can see the lines are all pretty smooth, but us heavier drivers do struggle when there's quite big uphills, which you do have in this, and also some of the tighter corners. So I can see why he's not a massive fan of it either. It's not one of my favourite tracks either, but we've got to have a bit of a diverse calendar, even though saying that the first part of the season is pretty much all the same track. But the second half of the season is a little bit more diverse and some more interesting tracks coming in, which is going to be quite exciting to show all of you. So you can see here, back on board myself here, I've got a bit of clear space, so at this point just try my best to put in those lap times. And even though I mentioned it's probably not my favourite karting venue, when you get a good, great, you can't really get a perfect lap, but as good as perfect as you can get, it is quite rewarding. It feels really nice once you hit all of the apexes and get the perfect slide through turn 1, for example, there. I mean, I'm not saying that was perfect by any means, but once you get the corner sort of hooked up and you get the flow going a little bit better than is normal around a track like this, it does feel quite rewarding. It feels like you're actually on the edge quite a bit, especially when you're coming down here, quite a lot of speed down from the flyover, and you're hitting the brakes trying to get into a 180-degree corner. So there are some tricky parts of this track, to be fair, and I can understand why it's not everyone's favourite venue, but you can definitely find some fun in it. There are some corners, like I'd say here, that you could get flat out through turn 1. That's quite fun sometimes. So on board with John now, and he's hit some traffic, and it's not just a little bit of traffic, it's quite a big run of karts here. So there's 4 in front of him now, 3, now 2 as he gets past, I think that might have been Mike letting him through there, as well as one of the other drivers as well, which might have actually been Greg. It's kind of hard to tell in these sort of conditions where it's so dark from the camera. But John has got a bit of a gap in front of him, he's got maybe a second, so no matter the kart in front of him, he should have a clean enough lap. But I say that the kart in front isn't particularly taking the best lines through here. It's hard to tell whether it's George or one of the other people that was randomly out here. There was about 5 of us and about 5 or 6 other random people out there, so it's a nice mix of skill levels out there. I'd like to say that we're hopefully a little bit better than the average person that goes karting, but you can see here John coming across someone that wasn't quite sure whether he could go for the move down the inside there, but he got that move done in the end, but definitely was held up there for a few laps. Let's go back on board with Greg here. Now it's a few laps later and John's actually letting him through. So Greg's had to take a slightly compromised line to the first corner here, but I think he was appreciative of John sort of getting out of his way. I think John was definitely dedicated to sort of setting a couple of good laps, backing off for a couple of laps to get himself some space and so on. And even though he did get mired in traffic a couple of times throughout this session, I think he did a pretty good job at that. Actually, his times across the board and times across our sessions, the way we split it up at least, was actually quite consistent. But it was actually the consistency of myself and the other people around him in the leaderboard that was varying a lot more. So it was interesting to see once we totted up the final results here. But Greg, once again, a little bit more compromised into turn 1. I think that was possibly Mike this time. But that was the end of a lap, so it doesn't matter so much. Now John, once again, I thought was letting me through here, but possibly not. A little bit opportunistic there from me. It's a shake at the head at myself. I shouldn't have gone for that there. I think John, he was sort of slightly off the pace, but he wasn't doing anything wrong there. I just braked way too late for that scenario here, but got my head down straight away. John let me through. He's having one of his off laps here, but as we skipped to his camera a few laps later, he was actually trying to go for a quick lap after to give himself some space, but saying that, quite quickly he got himself back into some traffic because of the skill levels that I've mentioned here. So he's got past one there, which is quite good. They left him a gap, which is nice to see. At the end of the day, we're not really racing. These are only sort of time trial sessions just for everyone, really, so we're just out there to have fun. So sometimes it's good to just let people by and enjoy your karting for yourself, but I can understand some people definitely want to get involved with a battle. But in front here, it's been actually a pretty decent lap from John there, all things considered. He had to get past someone and he's catching up to these guys in front, but overall not too bad at all. I could see some lunges going on in front of him. He follows one of the karts in front through, and generally I'd say a pretty decent lap there from John. Some nice little overtakes in there. And I can see in front of me here, George gets absolutely punted by this guy in front here. So I pointed at him saying, like, what is he doing? Because he had a little bit of a reputation within our group over this session. We definitely pointed out to this guy as being quite aggressive, but those are the way in random go-kart sessions where you get put with other people. But I thought, this guy's pretty aggressive. I'm going to go for an aggressive move myself. I'm going to fly down the inside here, and definitely on reflection, it was a bit of a dodgy one, I guess you'd say, a little bit opportunistic. But regardless, he was doing it to other people, so I thought I'm going to give it a go so he can get down the inside. But not much contact was made, but it is what it is. So now John, once again, trying to get past, and I think he's definitely putting some pressure on this car in front here. He's really trying to get past. He's trying to go cut back one way then the next, but he can't quite do it, especially on the flyover here. As I mentioned, us heavier drivers aren't a big fan of this. You can see how much time we lost there. But that was interesting. Now, back on board with myself here, and I'm trying to get past this 16 kart. So I'm going to try and look one way or the next. Can't get past there, but he goes deep once again, so I try and get the cut back. That doesn't work out, so I try and go around the outside, but you can't really go around outside here. It's just not really plausible. So once again, I'm trying to get this overtake done. Trying to look one way or the next. I think my racing line's a little bit better here. You can see he's checking over his shoulder a little bit here, so I sort of faked to the inside there. I knew that he'd try and defend it, but then eventually I think I do a pretty good move here. Nice decisive move down the inside there and get the overtake in. He wasn't very happy with that, massive old shunt into the back, but regardless, I got the move done. That was a nice clean overtake there, and I could just scamper off after that and just, I was quite a lot quicker than him, so I managed to get past him with not much trouble in the end there and just put in some good lap time. So John now trying to put in some late laps here. We're getting towards the end of this session, so I think we're going to ride on board with John for one last final lap here. Had a little bit of traffic at turn 1, but it got out of the way nicely, to be fair, and he's actually chasing a kart in front here, which seems to be pretty much on the pace here, so a good reference for John here. Maybe could have taken a little bit more speed into the braking zone through here, but he's getting a little bit mired up in traffic here. He's going to look to the inside here, and this might not work out here. It's quite close. It's a bit of a shame there for John. Didn't quite get the overtake in there, and not the greatest end to the lap, but the first part, I've got to say, was actually pretty decent. Then quickly after that, the end of session flags came out, and we could all go back to the pit lane to observe our times. There were a couple of little moments in there, some pushing and shoving, but I guess that's partly the way of indoor karting. Let's leave it at that. Let's have a look at the points then after this one. So actually some really interesting results from this round here. I'm going to start showing you the actual results of the races as we go into the future, but I think time trial formats and point systems is actually not the most interesting thing to look at. So I can tell you that I won 6 of the 8 sessions, or 5 of the other sessions, and the average session as well. They're the 6 sessions I won. And Mike actually got 2 of the fastest times in the middle of the session, where he was really consistent, put in some really nice lap times, and that saw him shoot up to first in class in 2 of the sessions. Interestingly, they were back to back in the middle of the session, so quite interesting how that all plays out there. But here's the points, as you can see here. 365 points at the top. Pulled out a little bit over John in this race. As mentioned before, he wasn't particularly looking forward to this one here, so it's a bit of a loss there in terms of points for John this time by. But Greg actually has closed in on John here. Can he possibly go and get second place in the championship, or even fight for the championship if I miss rounds later on in the season? We'll see how that all plays out with, of course, COVID and illnesses. Possibly people will be missing rounds at the top of this championship, so it could actually get quite exciting there. Mike gets himself into the top half of the leaderboard as well, which is really interesting as well, because both himself and my dad both had done 2 of the 4 rounds, actually George as well there. But you can see Mike has put himself into the top half of the standings there, ahead of my dad, who's on 128 points, George on 97. Weirdly, in the middle of the session, I had, as I mentioned, 6 of the 8 time trial victories, but weirdly I had a last place in one of them as well, which I don't know how it happened. It possibly was in the moment where I was spinning and having my own little incidents and battling with people, but that was a weird one to see in the time, just for me personally, because obviously I try and get in the top 3 each time, but no, I was last place in one of them, which I need to look at myself in the mirror and say, do better next time, Alex. But no, it's a bit of fun at the end of the day. So the midway points of the season is interesting at the top. 3 drivers completed all of the rounds so far, so you could say it's a 3-way battle for the championship, so we'll see how that plays out for the rest of the year. But there's also the Clubman's Championship, which is up for grabs, which is for the highest placed driver that hasn't won a championship already, which is excluding myself and John. So let's see how that plays out towards the end of the season. Greg currently leading that one. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you around soon. Goodbye.